The lockdown in France eases after 8 weeks, but many restrictions remain in place. Wearing face masks on public transportation is now mandatory. With the lockdown easing, approximately 400,000 businesses get back to work, but bars, restaurants and France's borders remain shut. And other countries in Europe, including Spain and Germany, loosen restrictions to limit the spread of COVID-19. Health officials, however, are employing a wait-and-see approach on which direction coronavirus infection rates are headed. Thank you very much for joining us here on France 24. We begin here in France, where after 2 months, the lockdown to limit the spread of COVID-19 has been eased. As of today, people are allowed to leave their homes without a certificate detailing the reason, but only commutes of less than 100 kilometers are permitted. Working from home is still being encouraged, and face masks are now mandatory on public transportation throughout France. For more, we can go across to France 24's James Andre, standing by at the Champs-Élysées here in Paris. James, it's the first day that non-essential services are reopening after 2 months. How are businesses coping with these new social distancing measures they've had to put in place?
Well, businesses have adapted. For example, you can see behind me one of, an international brand of fashion that, for example, has reorganized its shops. As you can see, people are queuing outside. There are measures of social distancing inside. You're not allowed to try the clothes, for example, at the moment. Masks are mandatory. So if you see something you like, well, you will take roughly the right size, try it at home. And if indeed it does not fit, well, you'll have to bring it back and then the shop will disinfect it. In another shop, for example, we saw today selling scarves and jumpers. Well, the saleswoman would actually put the scarf around her neck, and then if the customer wanted to buy it, then the scarf would be disinfected before it was given to the customer. So this type of measure. Now, what I can tell you here at the Champs-Élysées is that it is surprising to see how many people there are. Now, of course, it's not the affluence of a regular Monday, but there are a lot of people indeed, because I've been working for France 24 in Paris over the past few weeks, and I've actually seen this avenue completely deserted, so this is quite a change.
Quite a change indeed, and of course for the people out shopping, that they can't even try the clothes which they want to buy. But James, with the people you've been speaking to today, are they comfortable being outside of their homes?
Well, I'd say the ones who are comfortable with being outside their homes are here. Now, it is interesting when you speak to people, people say, right, yes, we believe it's safe. All those people I've spoken to. There was one lady, however, who did tell me that she put a face mask on because it's mandatory in some of the shops behind me, and that, in fact, she hadn't taken it off. She said that she felt much safer with a face mask. Her name was Monique, and she says it reminds me of the first time I had a cell phone. I felt safe with my cell phone in my pocket, and now I feel safe with my face mask on. So a lot of people on the streets wearing face masks, but basically a lot of people very happy to be out and about again. A man telling me he was very happy to see people outside. Another man also telling me his son, who was with him, they were in one of France's most well-known electronics shops, choosing a new laptop. Well, a very, very happy young man indeed, who had missed this shop, so this brand, sorely over the past few weeks. So people happy to be able to go out and shop once again, happy to be out and about, and then it's very probable that those who are too afraid to come out have indeed decided to stay at home. One last thing which is quite interesting is for hairdressers. It's interesting to note that if you want a haircut, you need to call right now, because there are weeks of waiting list before you can actually get a slot.
I called last week. Thank you very much for that, James. James Andre reporting there from the Champs-Élysées. For more, we can go across to France 24's International Affairs editor, Douglas Herbert. Doug, good evening to you. Now, as France eases the lockdown in place, there are many people who are conflicted over whether the confinement period should have ended. Some, however, are afraid for their economic survival. It's difficult for the authorities here to find that right balance, isn't it?
It's almost impossible, and there are no clear-cut answers. The debate is often depicted as one of those who fear contracting the virus if they go outside, in this new deconfined era, versus those who say, we need to survive, we need to eat, we need to make our livelihood and gain a living here. It's not quite that stark a choice because there are a lot of people, in fact, you could argue the majority of people in France, who are both fearful of getting the virus, yet also feel a very clear and present need to be out there engaging in the economy again and making a living. So it's not, a black and white debate here. Look, Emmanuel Macron himself said on the eve of this deconfinement, he says, this is not a return to normal by any means. What it is a new phase, a new stage in which France and the rest of Europe, and really the rest of the world until there's a vaccine, will be living with the virus. So essentially, France is entering down this, is starting down this deconfinement road with one hand on the emergency brake. And it is ready basically to reimpose, to slam on the brakes again and reimpose strict confinement measures, lockdown measures at the slightest sign of things not going well. 63%, it's a significant number of French in a recent YouGov poll, actually said they're afraid of contracting the virus again. Will that make them more cautious? Will that mean that they will strictly follow the rules? What is absolutely clear is the government does not want people to go out there in a free-for-all today or in the days to come thinking that the worst is behind them. They want them to be cautious, yet they want them to try to resume their lives. And striking that balance without getting neurotic, without getting overly panicked, and yet also being cautious and prudent at the same time, that is really the trick going ahead. And there's no easy academic answer or intellectual answer as to how you can do that.
Doug, elsewhere in Europe, we're seeing over in Germany that the reproduction rate, that's the rate at which one infected person could pass on the infection, is actually increasing. This as they have eased some of the lockdown measures in place. Is that a taste of what is to come for the rest of us?
Yep. Well, we hope it isn't, but more likely, sure, it is. Look, Germany was a model in Europe, did aggressive testing, has a very well-funded, very solid public health system, so great hospitals. It did almost everything by the book that you should do, and for a while was lauded as a success story. Last Wednesday, we had Angela Merkel, the chancellor, basically saying that Germany was now leaving what she called phase one of the pandemic behind it. Federal states in Germany, the Länder, started loosening their restrictions. And now a week later, as you just said, we do have those reports which came out over the weekend from a very prominent public health institute saying that the reproduction rate is over 1. What does that mean? It means that you have the virus spreading to more people. 10 people will infect 11 people. So it's exponentially expanding in a way. At the same time, Germany is also taking new measures because, like I said, there have been new lockdown measures put in place in areas, especially there were outbreaks in some slaughterhouses, meat slaughterhouses, also in homes for the elderly. And in those states, there are 3 states in which some lockdown restrictions have been reimposed. They're hoping to get that reproduction rate down below 1 again. And they want to avoid a scenario in which all of Germany, all of the Länder, all of the federal states will have to reimpose very draconian curbs and essentially leave deconfinement and go back into a lockdown mode. In order for that to happen, the threshold would be 50 cases of COVID, of coronavirus COVID, out of 100,000 population. Germany is not there yet, but there have been some red alarms going off in certain states, which has raised the hackles of some Germans. So Germany may be a taste of what is to come because the Germans tend to be rather disciplined. At least that's their reputation. The French have a reputation of being a little less disciplined. Le Parisien, which is a prominent newspaper, daily newspaper here, said it quite well over the weekend. They said the French are too spoiled to know how to be stoic. And that's the fear of the government and some high-level officials, public officials here, that the French are now going to see this as a liberation day. Despite all of their fears about getting the virus again, they will sort of let themselves go and in their sort of desire to resume a semblance of normal lives again, will give up some of those cautious precautionary measures and the health gestures that they have taken until now in order to protect themselves and those around them, their loved ones and their friends.
Liberation Day, but still a lot of things are shut here in France. No bars and restaurants and cafes. Doug, we're going to leave it there. Thank you very much for that. Now, for more on how the French government has handled its coronavirus response, we can speak to Lex Paulson, lecturer in rhetoric and human rights at Sciences Po here in Paris. Good evening. Thank you very much for joining us here on France 24. Now, a recent survey says that 60% of the French public don't have trust in how the government has handled the pandemic. Why is that? What could they have done differently?
Well, I actually sort of think that number is positive in the sense that when the polls have shown that the French were the most worried, confidence in the government, as it does around the world, tends to go up because the average citizen looks at the government as a protector. And so polls have shown, even in places where the government has done very poorly with the crisis, as in the U.S., that confidence in the government goes up when people are the most scared. Because I think the French public thinks that looking at the declining rate of new cases of COVID, the fact that the hospitals largely had enough respirators to treat the crisis, that they can go back to doing what they did in good times, which is feeling very pessimistic about their government and criticizing authority. So I actually think that expression of a lack of trust is sort of a reversion to the norm more than it is a troubling sign for the government.
Now, the last time Emmanuel Macron addressed the French Republic, he said, things cannot go back to normal until there is a vaccine or until there's a treatment for COVID-19. That's pinning his hopes on science. We don't have a sure answer that a vaccine is going to come out. Why do you think he's not betting on testing and going another route like the US, for instance?
Well, I think it's not an either or. I think that from Macron's speech, we had maybe more of an emphasis on the longer term and how the COVID crisis will readjust France, becoming more focused on injustice sociale, social injustice, also on a stronger Europe. One of Macron's themes since the beginning of his mandate, that this has to be an international effort and not a parochial one. So I think testing is very much a part of the Macron government strategy, the mass distribution of masks, the protection of vulnerable populations, because, as you say, a vaccine will not be a silver bullet and certainly will not be produced along a government timeline. And so I think that testing has been acknowledged as part of the strategy, even if it's been somewhat lacking to date.
It has been acknowledged, but they only want to test people who actually have COVID-19 symptoms. And from what we've learned, if anything, is a lot of the people who carry COVID-19 don't have symptoms. That's the problem, the fundamental problem in the French response.
Yeah, I think it's a very valid point, and I think with one of the reasons why maybe the government is setting those more ratcheting down expectations about mass testing is that they risk overpromising on testing and seeing the problems in other countries like the U.S. where Donald Trump said, "Oh, testing is not going to be a problem; everyone can get tests," and that kind of bluster was completely belied by the government's performance. And so I think one of the lessons the Macron government has learned is it's better to underpromise and overdeliver than to overpromise and underdeliver.
I have a question for you because, I know we're not anywhere near an election here in France, at least for the presidentials. How does one recover from, the economic pain that is going to be caused from this pandemic?
Well, from a political point of view, the first step is showing humility. And showing, I think, admitting that the government has not performed perfectly. And so that one takeaway message from Macron's speech, we have to reinvent ourselves, moi le premier, me the first, I think shows the posture that is required to be able to learn the lessons, both from a point of view of making better economic policy, helping the unemployed, helping small businesses, saving them from going under. Macron made a very firm, unequivocal commitment. No business will go bankrupt because of this crisis. And the French government has been far more outspoken in its commitments to protecting business than the English-speaking world has been. So it remains to be seen if the French government will be able to carry forward those promises, but at least in principle, the commitment to standing by the unemployed and standing by small businesses at no matter what cost in terms of debt to the French government, I think is at least sending the signal that government is on the side of the people who are suffering from this crisis. And I think that is not only the better thing to do for the country, it's a smart political bet as well.
Lex Bolton, thank you very much for joining us here on the program today. That's it from me. Thank you very much for watching.